Hello everyone, Snarky Arts here with another video. I'm a model kit builder, painter, cosplayer, great big Star Wars fan, particularly of Boba Fett, so I couldn't be more pleased with the success of the Mandalorian TV show and to share with you today my Boba Fett themed AR. This is a pet project of mine that I've been working on for quite some time. Now if you want to skip ahead to the painting section, I'll put a link in the description below to that timestamp, but I'd like to go over the parts with you. And what started off is picking the coolest looking part morphed into, if Boba Fett were to really want to use a modern weapon, what might he want in it?
Okay, they're talking about fictional characters. Fictional characters. Am I getting through to you at all?
While still following the rule of cool. So let's take a look. So basically here's the parts that I tried to build this thing with. Didn't end up using all of them, but did end up using most of them. Just drink in the quality of my attempt at a parts table montage of glamour shots. Starting off, we've got your standard A2 flash hider, because I figured why would Boba Fett want to give away his position? And I'd planned on surrounding that with the Indian Creek design blast forward device. The barrel is a Faxon 11.5 inch mid-length. I wanted something short enough to be maneuverable in tight spaces, but after doing some brief research on ballistics, I found that anything below 10.5 inches really made the bullets perform very poorly, so why go for the bare minimum? Why not just add an extra inch?
That's what she said!
The strike rail was chosen almost exclusively for aesthetic reasons, with the only requirement that the inside diameter be able to fit around my blast forward device, which ended up being replaced with a Caw Industries linear comp. I decided to not go with direct impingement, but instead purchase the Superlative Arms piston kit, because I thought, well, why would the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy want to spend all of his free time cleaning his weapons, when you could easily avoid just shoving a bunch of carbon into the bolt carrier with a piston-based system. The Aero Precision charging handle was chosen for its ambidexterity, and I honestly just thought it looked cool. The Odinworks upper, again chosen mostly for aesthetic reasons. I wasn't a huge fan of the forward assist on these, and I really liked the aesthetic, especially with the clean lines and some of the capsule-based designs which carried over into the dust cover, which I'm a big fan of, because a lot of capsule-shaped aesthetics exist within the Star Wars universe as well. Went with the Aero Precision M4E1. Again, it looks really good, had flared magwell, had an integrated trigger guard, and had some very nice features where you didn't have to hammer in a bunch of roll pins to get some of the internals to stay in place, which I was a big fan of. The Rise Armaments flat-face trigger I went with. They seem to have a good reputation. I like the idea of a flat-face trigger, and as a drop-in, it was super easy to install. Another Odinworks part I went with was just an extended mag release for convenience. And again, as I do tend to shoot left-handed, I went with the ambidextrous mag release. Turned out this was one of my personal favorite parts when actually test firing it. I am a big fan of this mag release. The bolt catch, I wanted to have a little extra room for my finger to hit the textured pad, so I went with the Maritime Bolt Catch by Geissele. Added a little QD end receiver plate, because I figured at some point you'd probably want to mount a sling to it, as any good bounty hunter would. And for comfort, I went with the Ergo Grip, like rough texture. It's got some finger grooves in it. It's got some nice grippy texture, so whether you're using gloves on your hands or barehanded, it just feels very comfortable and secure. Rise Armament Stealth Recoil Spring. It seemed like a nice, easy, simple one-piece drop-in, and apparently is supposed to really help with the twanging sound that is common in some other standard buffer and spring systems. The SBA-3 tactical brace, again, another very aesthetically chosen device, but it also seemed very practical too. It is collapsible, so you can extend it for comfort or for short ranges. Now getting into the painting portion, it's important to remove any grease and dirt and debris before you start painting something. So what I did is I took everything apart and used a non-toxic, environmentally safe degreasing solution from Duracoat, which after having used it, I'm pretty sure is just simple green, which I think you can buy at almost any grocery store. I could be wrong. But basically, I just started throwing all the parts into this stuff and scrubbing them down, getting all the grease removed. Once you've scrubbed all the parts with the cleaner, you got to make sure that you rinse everything off and set it out to dry. After masking everything off, I decided to get some spray on Duracoat, which is sort of like in a two-part epoxy with an activator at the bottom of the can you have to press in. This stuff does have an odor to it, so you really, really want to be in a well-ventilated area and definitely wear protection. Now, what I didn't realize is that the spray cans came with two nozzles, and the one I started with using was a very fan-shaped spray pattern, and it didn't exactly give me the kind of coverage I was hoping for. It was either too thin or incredibly thick in some spots. So after a couple parts, I decided to switch out the nozzle and then found that that was much, much easier to use. And so here we go with the new, more circular spray pattern nozzle on the strike rail. I was much happier with the coverage I was getting with this. And even though these look good after only one coat, I did give them a few minutes to dry, and I think I ended up giving them about 3 coats in total. And after I was done with all the detailing and weathering, I put a clear satin coat of Duracoat over everything as well to help give it a protective finish. After a good 48 hours or so to let the Duracoat set up, I started airbrushing in some weathering acrylics into the recessed areas just to give it a little faux shading, little dirt and grime look so it didn't quite look so new. Here I'm just airbrushing in a mix of ink and wash into all the recessed grooves. This is very time consuming and you have to have a bit of a steady hand, but the end result is quite rewarding. So we're just going to speed this up so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing. I'm also running a bit of green underneath the Picatinny rail and just any other places that visually look like they might not get as much sunlight or might collect a little bit more grease and grime. Just kind of darkening up those colors. Again, if you work quick enough, a little Q-tip and some water, you can clean up some mistakes. You're certainly not going to brush off the Duracoat. Now working on the upper receiver, just doing a very similar technique as on the rail, just using a little bit of green wash to really edge highlight, or I guess edge shade in this case, some of the recessed areas around all the little geometric shapes. Oops, made a mistake. Just use a little water on a Q-tip and clean that up. Now I'm just going to mask off little areas here because I want to make the sort of little yellow rectangle pattern that's on Boba Fett's helmet on the upper. So we're just going to mask off some of the areas that we don't want to paint. Then using some Tamiya tape, which is fantastic stuff, I'm just going to space out some little basic rectangles on the upper. A little Q-tip to help press that down so we don't get any bleed under. Now, what I did is I used a little sponge and some liquid mask. It's kind of like a latex material that dries quickly. And I'm just sponging in a few areas that I want to remain the base green color. So when I get done painting these yellow, I can just kind of rub that off with a pencil eraser, and it'll look like chip paint. Now we've got some yellow Duracoat ready to go. Again, well-ventilated area, respirator, and gloves. And I'm just going to paint some of the little bits and bobs that I decided would look good yellow. So here we're doing the extended magazine release, not the extended magazine. Here we're doing the extended takedown pins and the bolt catch. And now the upper. Again, you probably see me keep spraying the paper towels because the two-part epoxy that you're mixing up for Duracoat, it will kick rather quickly, so you do have to work rather rapidly, otherwise you're going to start getting spider webbing, or it may just jam up your airbrush altogether. To further add to the illusion of depth, along with wear and tear, I'm using a transparent orange ink and airbrushing it into the same recesses, similar with what I did with the dark green, into the green areas. And sorry I'm a little off camera here. You can kind of see what I'm doing, just sort of outlining the shapes. And when you're happy with that, we're just going to peel off the mask and take a look at it. And I am really happy with how the Tamiya and frog masking tape didn't allow any bleed over or bleed under. Now I'm just going to do the similar technique with the charging handle. Just add a little recessed shading and a little Q-tip with some water, or just clean up the overspray. Now to really scuff this up, because the Duracoat underneath should be pretty tough, I'm using a little scrubber pad here to not only knock off any of the liquid latex that I'd sponged on previously, I'm also just going to wipe off, if I can, it's very difficult, the yellow Duracoat and try and expose some of the green underneath. And with enough elbow grease you can kind of get the desired look. And there's the liquid mask in question. Again, just a little dip into that, and then start sponging all the areas where I want to see chipped paint on the handguard. With a technique like this, sometimes less is more. Now again, I've mixed up some dark red Duracoat in my airbrush, and I'm going to try and work as quickly as I can while getting nice coverage. This is after I've given the liquid latex at least a day to set up, and decided that I wanted the handguard to sort of mimic the T-shaped visor on Boba Fett's helmet. So I masked off a little bit to sort of emulate that swooping T shape he's got. Now for the lower, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to add a nice little Mando symbol to it, similar to a shoulder pad. So base coat it yellow, shade it, put a little masking on it. Bantha skull decal, once I get my frame set up. And we're just going to add some sponged areas where we want chipped paint to appear. Again, spray on some white Duracoat. Similar to the symbol on the opposite side of the lower receiver here, and just ignore my messy spray patterns. Now that the Duracoat is good and dry and I've chipped off all the paint that I want for weathering, I use a little bit of transfer tape on my vinyl stencil. Put that in place. Now I realized after the fact that I kind of messed up on this and should have done a little bit of masking, so here I am with a Q-tip and some acetone trying to clean up a whole lot of white that should not be there. But hey, who's gonna know? Except me and everyone who watches this. So learn from my mistakes. Now we're mixing up a small bit of blue Duracoat. And once that's dry, then we can put on the little detail stencils. Mix up another small batch of red Duracoat and fill them in. Luckily, this project only required a handful of colors. Again, same red color on the Bantha skull on the opposite side of the receiver. And once all that's good and dry, you start peeling off your masking and pray that you didn't get any bleed under. And looking pretty good. Yeah, that's looking good. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Now I'm taking a little bit of black and green acrylic paint and a sponge, and similar to what I did with the liquid latex, I'm just going to sponge in some areas where I want the paint to be chipped to sort of reveal what could be an earlier coat of green or perhaps a primer undercoat. And again, this is a less is more type of technique. And some of the larger spots I'm making big enough for me to go back in and sponge the inside of them with a silver paint to make it look like there's even further chipping exposing bare metal. Now, you want to just use a little bit of practicality, I guess, if that's a thing. Now, when using this, you just want to think ahead a little bit about where the most likely places for wear and tear and chipped paint might be. So here I'm just exposing a little bit of foam metal with some silver paint on some of the raised edges. And this works great for the larger areas, but for some of the smaller areas, you're going to want to use a little bit of brushwork, like in these little spots here. And I'll just speed this up a little bit. And just keep working until you're happy with it, because you can always wipe it off and start over. Now I had a spare Bantha Skull stencil, so I figured, well, why not put one on the brace there and sort of ghost it in with a little bit darker green. So I'm just going to go over it lightly with an airbrush, sort of like a blackish coal green. There we go. Looking pretty good.
If you enjoyed this video and want to subscribe to this channel, click on the Vault Boy logo in the corner of your screen. Thanks for watching, and click the thumbs up button to like and hit the bell for notifications.